6 years ago, I uploaded In Defense of Angie Onaga, and unless you've been living under a rock, you know I am a pretty big fan of her. I look back on that video today and I do think it still holds up pretty well, and I'm very proud of it, honestly. Because of that video, it kickstarted this YouTube channel, and I think I've genuinely changed countless people's opinions about Angie. If you by chance haven't seen that yet, please do consider watching it. It's one of the better videos on my channel, actually. Also in 2018, I discovered Danganronpa. I played through all 4 games, watched the 3 anime arcs, and perhaps most importantly, I've been able to meet and become friends with people that I probably wouldn't have in any other circumstance. I was also trying to break into the streaming world, and guess what feature my PS4 came with that allowed me to do so? That's right, streaming! Playing Danganronpa 2 for the first time was kind of like a fine wine, and I say that in the same way that the Hope's Peak arc in its entirety kind of is too. And if you've been around from the very beginning of the Danganronpa era, like I'm talking before May 2018, you will know my absolute adoration for another character. A character that, like Angie, has only divided people. A character that I feel like everyone either just seems to love or outright hate. Mikan Tsumiki. If you're in the I dislike her club, I really do get it. I'm not gonna be like, oh, what's that? You hate her? Nah, we're not like that here. Truthfully, the two do share a lot of similar characteristics. Trying to help in any way possible, getting this interpreted as being a morally great character, undoubtedly being a central figure to the plot in Chapter 3, and being absolutely adorable. She's cute as hell, man. From the outset, Mikan's character catches everyone's eyes, and it's impossible to ignore her. And this is possible thanks to several reasons. The way her characterization just hits you like a brick wall immediately lets you know you are not just getting another timid personality this year. It's in stark contrast with Trigger Happy Havoc. The first game did it with Chihiro, whose timid personality was used to emphasize their insecurities with their identity. Meanwhile, Mikan's reasons for her timidity come bundled with learning about her past, and the things she ends up revealing to the player are objectively horrifying. Of course, we also have no choice but to mention the cringe fanservice scenes that nobody liked and everybody hated. I know this is 100% factual because I have personally talked to everyone who played the game. While they are unsettling, they also make her impossible to ignore, with her clumsy behavior practically forcing Class 77B and the viewer to pay attention to her. These scenes, meant to give the player base probably some quick laugh at her expense, also had the uncanny ability to have many, such as myself, feel deeply sympathetic and a desire to keep on coming back to her free time events in the hope we'd see an ending where she's given a reprieve from her pain, coming back to complete her arc long after you finish the main story. It's this mental response that makes Tsumiki a character whose vulnerabilities and emotions tug at the heartstrings. Mikan's journey through despair, manipulation, and ultimately redemption highlights a narrative arc that was both heart-wrenching and profoundly human. This is a frame from Danganronpa 3. Mikan has mere seconds left as an on-screen character in the series. In these final moments, she used every second to its fullest, delivering a conclusion to an arc that resonates with redemption. I say this next part having thought about it for 6 years, and you may not fully grasp this yet, but trust me when I say it. Mikan Tsumiki is one of the most fascinating characters in all of contemporary media. You know, if you went into watching Danganronpa 3 Despair Arc without playing any of the 2 games, you'd probably think for the first few episodes that this was some slice-of-life seasonal anime. By like episode 3, it's pretty clear that this is going away from that and moving towards something that might end bittersweetly. And if you were a fan of Mikan, having played the games and such going into episode 7, it got rough for you, I imagine. But hey, from being down low, you can only go up, right? What do episodes 8 to 11 make you feel as a Mikan fan? Pain and agony. But okay, if it got really bad in Despair Arc, maybe she at least started out from a happy place, right? Nah, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We might as well start from the very beginning.
Mikan Tsumiki's backstory unveils a relentless barrage of abuse and neglect that shaped her into the person we see in Danganronpa 2. Her classmates tormented her, a clear pattern of abuse that's evident from her interactions within the group. Her home life was equally traumatic as she was a domestic abuse victim. To say she has self-esteem issues would be like saying the sky is blue. This isn't simply about a character being clumsy or socially awkward. Mikan's past is a textbook case of how sustained bullying can alter someone's mental health and behavior. She was ridiculed, physically harmed, and emotionally isolated, which ingrained a deep sense of worthlessness and a desperate need for any form of acceptance. The extent of Mikan's abuse also manifests in her professional competence as a nurse, paradoxically becoming a means for seeking the validation she lacks. She excels in a caretaking role, putting others' needs above her own, which on the surface appears commendable. However, this selflessness is not entirely altruistic. It stems from her belief that she must be useful in order to receive love and not be abandoned. Her ability to care for others, therefore, is intertwined with her traumatic experiences, making her professional identity a double-edged sword that simultaneously empowers and ensnares her in her past. Psychological theories such as attachment theory illustrate how early adverse experiences with peers can lead to insecure attachment styles in adulthood. Mikan exhibits these signs through her exaggerated need for approval and her fear of abandonment. These are not quirks, but survival mechanisms that have evolved from her past traumas, used subconsciously to navigate a world that has been consistently hostile to her. And I want you to take a moment to think about who stepped in and offered her love and friendship. Can you guess who it is? You're absolutely right, it's Junko Enoshima. Mikan's relationship with Junko Enoshima introduces another layer of abuse, this time psychological and emotional manipulation on a really twisted scale. Junko recognizes Mikan's vulnerability and exploits it to an extreme. It's messed up, not just because of its implications for Mikan's autonomy, but because it mirrors the dynamics often found in abusive relationships. Junko provides the illusion of safety and love, only to pull it away, deepening Mikan's dependence and exacerbating her fears of abandonment and worthlessness. The cruelty of this manipulation lies in its subtlety and how it distorts Mikan's perception of love and acceptance, making her actions under Junko's influence a reflection of manipulated loyalty rather than genuine malice. So, when you think of the evil things she may have done, you need to consider that she was acting not from a place of inherent cruelty, but from a distorted sense of loyalty and a desperate attempt to cling to the only source of affection she believed she had. Imagine for a second that you are in Mikan's shoes. You're being told what you're doing is right, and to have that backed up by getting physically and emotionally abused, I would find that very hard to believe you would not have some level of cognitive dissonance in that regard.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but as a fan of Mikan, I did not want to see her getting the shit kicked out of her. That was not a fun scene to watch.
It's never a fun scene when Mikan's getting the shit kicked out of her. As the rest of this video is kind of gonna show, she really doesn't deserve it?
Yeah, I mean, Despair Arc in general was just, like, awful. It was so bad. I had to watch parts of it for this video, and I just was like, this is just absolutely terrible.
The time that they spent for the whole anime, they kind of needed it per arc. They needed, like, a 46-episode anime.
You know, as a Kirigiri and Mikan fan, it was just terrible. So, anything else you want to get off your chest about Despair Arc?
No, it sucks. It doesn't deserve our time.
It really doesn't. To make matters worse, the entirety of Class 77B had to deal with this emotional manipulation in some capacity. They were all victims of extensive brainwashing by Junko too, compelling them to commit atrocities that they otherwise would never consider doing. Yet the response to each character's actions varies significantly within the community, and it feels like Mikan gets all of the vitriol. Consider characters like Kazuichi, Sonia, and Fuyuhiko. Each of them, under the influence of the same brainwashing, committed acts that were just as, if not more horrific than Mikan. It's implied that Sonia, the leader of Novoselic, ordered mass executions of her own civilians or enforced collective suicides. Kazuichi played no Russian IRL, attaching machine guns to cars and going around just shooting people to impress Sonia, believe it or not. And Fuyuhiko did Yakuza things to spread despair. What I gather is that these actions don't receive the same level of scrutiny or disdain from the general community. So to back up this idea, I ran a poll to see where the community stands today as it pertains to Tsumiki and the other remnants' actions. Anyway, let's send it over to Nuke inside Google Earth to get these results. Nuke? Thanks, Nuke, and you're right. Anyways, guys, welcome back to another episode of Chart Party. My name is not John Boyce, and I'm currently armed with cold, hard data in the abyss of fandom opinions. I know you're dying to see what people think, as am I to tell you all what I found. So, yes, people tend to have a warped perception of Mikan, and the community poll we ran aimed to measure the level of scrutiny or disdain each member of Class 77B receives for their actions in Danganronpa 2 and 3. And the results were all your fault. First up, I asked which remnant of Despair's actions were the most disapprovable, and the results are interesting actually. Sonia leads the pack in this regard with 32.4% of the vote, likely due to the implied idea that she enforced those collective suicides in her country. And guess who's in second place? Oh, it's Mikan. Ah, dang it. Despite being the favorite scapegoat for everything wrong under the sun, she only got 29.2% of the vote, which is honestly less than I expected. I guess being a nurse who only tortured but didn't actually hurt one person on screen isn't quite as bad as a princess who was implied to have killed her people. Anyway. Next, what character's backstory resonated with you the most? With this one, I was trying to see people's empathy. If you've done any of Tsumiki's free time events or watched any part of this video, you know her backstory is wholly tragic. Yet the results don't really show this perception. Hajime wins at 41.6% and by a wide gap is ahead of second place Peko, who got 23.8%. Mikan is down at third place with 21.6%, and I swear this isn't a joke, Nagito got 13.0% exactly. The unluckiest number given to the ultimate lucky student? Absolutely poetic. Question 3. This was a decoy question meant to give the overall poll a veil. I didn't want people to think that this was a Mikan-centric poll, but it was. I could have included more fair questions that gave every remnant an equal chance, but I learned the number one rule of data journalism from one of the best. Come in with an agenda, then bend the rules however you need to in order to prove your point. Anyway, out of the hardest choices in Danganronpa 2, Gundam's fight with Nekomaru was deemed the most justified, and shout out to the 2.2% of respondents who said that Junko Enoshima killing the entire reserve course, 2,357 people mind you, was the most justified out of anything that happened in DR2. Even more than Chiaki sacrificing herself, and even more than Peko protecting Fuyuhiko. I just put that in because I knew someone would pick it. Number 4. Who had the most unfair motive? And this one genuinely surprised me too. Out of the 5 black indecisions in Danganronpa 2, Mikan's was deemed the most unfair by the community. I genuinely thought it was going to be Gundam in this one, but it wasn't. The Despair Disease, which we'll talk a lot more about later, is by a wide margin the top selection. And I'm honestly happy with this. This is exactly what I was hoping to see. Some level of empathy for her from the player base. So glad we could agree on this, guys. Moving along. Who had the most compelling reasons for their actions? Well, Nagito's chaotic methodology takes this one with nearly half the vote, because apparently luck mixed with a little old-fashioned trolling is a compelling idea. Teru's defense of, I just wanted to see my mom and make sure she was okay, got 28.6% meanwhile. And Mikan's deeds only conjured up 13.5% of the sympathy. Because why feel bad for someone manipulated by an unfair disease and trauma? To reiterate, the community perceives Mikan's motive as the most unfair in the game, but her actions as a result of that motive are only the third most compelling? I guess. With the final 3 questions, I wanted to again explore the idea of, do these characters who committed some atrocities during their time get the same level of scrutiny as Mikan? Well, Sonia is actually one of the more liked characters, even though her actions as a remnant were the most disapproved. She sits at around an 83% approval rating, which is higher than most world leaders, I'll give her that. Fuyuhiko scored even higher than Sonia, probably due to the character development he got in the back half of Goodbye Despair, as he clocked out with an approval score of 93.5%, the highest in this study by miles. And finally, Mikan Tsumiki. Before I show you this number, I want you to take a guess. Remember, Sonia 83, Fuyuhiko 93. What does a character who only directly killed 2 people on screen get compared to the others who, as remnants, contributed to an unquantifiable death toll? A 91? Maybe an 87? 85? No. Mikan's approval rating is 74.1. From a fan of hers perspective, this is nothing short of a travesty. Look at that. More than a quarter on average of Danganronpa fans have a negative opinion of Tsumiki, which is utterly baffling, considering they simultaneously think her motive was the most unfair out of all of them in Goodbye Despair. And to add the cherry on top of this goofy sundae, the biggest point that we haven't even gotten to mention yet is that Tsumiki was completely incapable of controlling her own actions, not just as a remnant, but also famously in Chapter 3. How can she be thought of more negatively if the community actually shows more sympathy for her situation than any other character in the game? Well, irrationality, as we'll talk about next, tends to warp people's perception of a character. Now for the point that I realized hours after finishing Danganronpa 2 Chapter 3. The despair disease motive stands out to me, and even to the community, as one of the most egregiously unfair motive in the series' history. This disease was a cosmic injustice that took away any semblance of control the characters might have had over their actions. Mikan, already burdened with a traumatic past and a fragile psyche, was hit particularly hard by a strain that allowed her to recall her memories as a remnant, twisting her actions beyond her usual demeanor. Unlike typical motives, which play on the character's fears or pre-existing desires, this disease hijacked their autonomy, making them act in ways that they would never under normal circumstances.
The fallout was tragic. Ibuki was killed whilst she was fighting her case of despair disease, and was under the care of Mikan doing so. She was strangled to death. Then eventually, Hiyoko walks in trying to get help with her kimono. She walks in on Mikan trying to kill Ibuki, and has her throat slit. It's easy to see why these 2 actions alone could make her the target of significant animosity from the player base, and the characters within the game for that matter. However, to hold her solely responsible overlooks the critical factor of the disease's influence. It wasn't naturally occurring, it wasn't a chance encounter, it was put in place by Junko. Her manipulation of the disease and the total orchestration of the despair that led Mikan to commit these acts point to a much deeper evil than any action Mikan ever made. Though we're not trying to say she has no flaws. Does she have flaws? Yes. Is she a genuinely kind soul who wants to help the others despite her own problems? Yes. And another thing, it's her kind soul that wants to help others that gets her infected with the disease that causes her to kill Hiyoko and Ibuki. The motives of the first 3 chapters feed on a character's memories and relationships and target a specific person. They're more interconnected than people realize. Teruteru and Peko had people that they fully trusted and loved dearly. Teruteru loved his mom, and Peko loved Fuyuhiko, love that drove them both to kill. Mikan is the same, but with one crucial differing detail: Junko does not return that love. Teruteru's recollection of his mother's care and Fuyuhiko's outburst of devastation towards Peko's execution display love. But Junko is completely absent from Mikan's declaration of love, to the point where even her name doesn't pass by Mikan's lips. It's no coincidence that Junko's artificial disease targets Mikan in a way that all but forces her to fall from heaven, as it were, in a way that makes it look like it was her own accord. But was it really her fault that she was forced to take care of people who got infected by a disease that Junko propagated? Was it her fault that when she eventually came in close contact with them trying to help, she also got infected? And is it her fault that the strain she ended up getting turned her psyche into one that resembled her past as a remnant?
The answer to all of these is no. And yet, the general perception remains that she embodies evil. And it's been 12 years since Danganronpa 2 came out. If she is the target of your outrage and not Junko, I guarantee you're mad at the wrong person. It was painful having to prove that she was the killer, honestly. I wanted there to be that one piece of evidence that was like, oh wait, no, she's clear actually. Because that always seemed to happen, right? When it was starting to become abundantly clear that Mikan was the killer, I was terrified, honestly. I thought they were going to go the route of a Karumi or Leon style execution, just pure agony and something akin to medical torture the whole way through. Compared to everything else in the series, this execution was awful. What, you seriously thought I'd say this was the best execution in the series and adds to her character? No, this was absolutely terrible. Both figuratively and literally. Figuratively because she was now dead, and literally because it makes so little sense. So seeing that it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be in my head made her death just a smidge more tolerable. Just a smidge. It was still terrible enough that, and I swear this isn't a joke, I genuinely had to take a walk after finishing Chapter 3. It's so goofy to say that over a video game 6 years later, but yeah, it happened. Other than Angie, there is not another main series death that tore me up as much as Mikan's did. If you doubt this, just listen to my reaction.
You're the only one! I'm right? You're kidding now. You're the killer, aren't you? You've got to be kidding me.
What are you talking about?
No way.
This game fucking sucks.
I hate my life.
Whether you did or did not have trouble with her death is okay. But as far as Nyx and I are concerned, it's only now that we're getting to the point of this video. Mikan challenges people's willingness to forgive. After we learn the truth in Chapter 6, and even after Danganronpa 3 for that matter, do her critics still detest her? Even after everything she and 77B went through? I watched the anime in 2018 and concluded immediately after finishing it that Mikan deserved a second look from the player base. She was my favorite in the second game, so of course I would arrive at that thought. How many characters in this series have done equally horrific things of their own free will? Out of the 18 class trials, one Blackened had zero autonomy. One. Mikan. The character who many just wanted to see happy, or at least given a brief reprieve from her past, was forced into committing a murder with the most unfair motive in Danganronpa history. I find it hard to believe that if you were put in that exact same situation, coming out of the Neo World program knowing you couldn't stop what you were doing, you would feel immense guilt, and you'd probably try to redeem yourself in any way possible. If you understand that, you'll not only come to appreciate the story a little bit more, but you can discuss agency, victimhood, and redemption on a deeper level. And redemption is something every individual needs at some point, whether fictional or real. Remember when I said other than Angie, there was not another main series death that tore me up as much as Mikan's did? Yeah, well, a month after completing Goodbye Despair, I watched Danganronpa 3. Here's a fun question. Which character from that godforsaken anime am I also a massive fan of? And when they died, I cried like a baby. I'll give you a second to think about it. Okay, seconds up. If you said Kyoko Kirigiri, you are absolutely correct. I'm gonna go off on a tangent here, so just bear with me. If you're a fan of her or of the Negiri pairing, you know exactly the emotional rollercoaster I'm going to be talking about. The episode in Future Arc where it seemed we lost her too was devastating. Also, the fact that Chiaki would also die around this time in Despair Arc added yet another crushing blow, and made this stretch of DR3 just horrible for anyone who even remotely cared about either characters. And I know I wasn't alone here. I wasn't the biggest Chiaki fan at the time, but even now 6 years later, I can't bring myself to watch her DR3 execution again. I rarely ever cry, but this was probably 1 out of maybe 10 times in recent memory, dating back to 2018 mind you, that I could think of when I genuinely sobbed after seeing something. I saw it once, and that's honestly more than enough. Seeing the DR2 cast become remnants alongside Chiaki losing her life was equally as tough for me. And seeing Mikan so reverently appreciate despair as if it's the greatest thing ever just hurt my soul. And yet, through that heartbreak, through everything that got thrown the viewer's way, and every single time the Jabberwock Island survivors felt any semblance of despair, every time something just absolutely horrific happened to one of them, there was something that would change those feelings. The Goodbye Despair cast was able to atone, and in doing so, a glimmer of redemption emerged.
じゃあそれを飲んでれば NG コードを取っても平気ってこと？ずっと仮死状態です。だからこれを見つけて使った人はさっき蘇生させておきました。
Cure W always wins in the end. You can call the Hope Arc ending cheesy. You can say Kiriyuri had plot armor. You can think everyone in this image is a cringe redditor who doesn't know what good writing is. You can do whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is, to atone for her sins as ultimate despair, Mikan Tsumiki saved the life of another, and in turn, made a community cry tears of pure joy. In the process, capping off a profoundly human narrative arc for her character. I don't think she just saved Kirigiri's life. I think it was her own salvation. And viewers were left to grapple with it all. Well, really they were just strapped in for the ride. Hope Arc brought a bittersweet, cathartic end to the agonizing journey that Class 77B went through. But what happens after the carnival lights dim and the crowd goes home? What comes next for Mikan and her classmates? Well, it's implied they return to Jabberwock Island in the real world, the place where a nightmare began for them. It's a geographically isolated part of the world, but symbolically significant. This is where, amidst the echoes of their past sins, they begin the real work of atoning for their actions as remnants. It's here where they start to rebuild, not buildings or establishments, but themselves. After the credits roll and the viewers leave, the real work began for them. The work that isn't televised, put on a disc, or sold on Steam. It's probably been messy for them at times, definitely painful, but also profoundly human. This has been their chance to prove that change is possible and that people can grow. And I personally believe great change has been happening on Jabberwock Island. Indeed, Mikan's story is not simply a narrative of despair, weird fan service, and redemption. She's not a character without flaws. She's not a ooh-woo nurse or anything like that. Personally, I think she resonates with audiences for a different reason. Her character is largely like a mirror, reflecting the complex thoughts, ideas, and feelings that come with being human. Behind every action, there's a history or a context that shapes our decisions. Great figures in our culture had their blemishes, but their fans were able to look past them and appreciate their accomplishments and who they are. With Danganronpa, the writers were inviting you to appreciate the layers of storytelling, as well as reflect on the themes of guilt, redemption, and resilience. I think Tsumiki perfectly encapsulates how in the world, everyone has a backstory. Everyone deserves empathy and understanding, and sometimes a second chance can redefine a legacy. It's why I, and hopefully you, have come to understand that Mikan Tsumiki is one of the most fascinating characters in the history of contemporary media. Hey guys, thank you very much for watching through to the end. I know this was a very, very long character analysis, but if you enjoyed it, please drop a like and hit subscribe. It really does help the channel out. Also, a very special thank you to Detective Nyx for their contributions of co-writing the script, doing voiceover, and drawing the thumbnail art. Without them, I would not have been able to make this video, so massive shout out to them. Thank you also to everyone who pre-read the script and gave their thoughts and kind words of encouragement. You guys are awesome. One more thing, I have been wanting to dabble in creative writing for years, and I was finally able to sit down and pursue it a little bit. If you're a fan at all of the pairing of Hajime and Mikan together, consider checking out Healing Shores on AO3, written by yours truly. In general, I wish there was just more Hinamiki content. God, do I wish there was more Hinamiki content. It's still a work in progress, so there will be more to come. But if you think I'm cooking with it, consider leaving a kudos and a comment over there. Alright, I know this was a long outro and a long video, but again, thank you so very much for watching. See you guys.